Hello and welcome. This is your host, Olivia Brown, with my new friend, senior staff writer, Matthew Holloway. Very excited to have you here today. It's your first time in studio with us, and I know you're going to do great because just talking with you before got me very enthusiastic about how we're going to play on screen.
Well, thank you very much, Olivia. And it's great to be here at the Western Journal. I've been a reader for many years now, and it's just an exciting place to be. And right now, it's more critical than ever that voices like those we're building here are being put out into the world.
I 100% agree. So Ron DeSantis is making news again for a bold move in which he fired his state Hillsborough County attorney for not enforcing laws on minors and the sex changes, and also for not enforcing abortion laws that Governor DeSantis has signed. And Governor DeSantis says, if you're not going to follow the law, then you don't deserve to hold office. Let's listen to what he had to say.
When you flagrantly violate your oath of office, when you make yourself above the law, you have violated your duty, you have neglected your duty, and you are displaying a lack of competence to be able to perform those duties. And so today we are suspending State Attorney Andrew Warren, effective immediately.
That was really a bold move on his part. Matthew, what do you think about him using his veto powers like that?
Well, a lot of people ultimately forget that the governor of a state is the highest possible law enforcement officer. Too many AGs across the country have forgotten this, and Ron DeSantis is making a perfectly legal constitutional move here in the state of Florida. He is asserting that laws are there to be enforced and that prosecutorial discretion does have its limitations. You are entrusted with the enforcement of the law equally by the U.S. Constitution and by the Florida Constitution. And basically, DeSantis is his boss. If you're not going to have people in your administration working with you who are going to perform their tasks in a legal, proper fashion, it is incumbent upon you to be the check against that power. Exactly.
And this was a very interesting law that he chose to fire him. It was based on a 1937 law that originally had to do with gambling. But if you look at the ins and outs of it, this is how he had the power to fire Andrew Warren as a state attorney, which is critical. And a lot of people, he was trending all over Twitter today, are calling for other states to do this. And I 100% agree. I do not think that our Republican governors in particular use the powers that they have enough to make sure that people are enforcing laws. For example, in Arizona, we have Adrian Fontes, who we just talked about yesterday, who was blatantly disregarding the law. And look, he's still in office, and now he just ran and won the primary for Secretary of State, praying that he doesn't. But other governors need to be following in DeSantis's steps. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. The governors, particularly, again, the Republican governors, a lot of them come from the business world. A lot of them, like, President Trump, for example, they may not have had all of the intermediate steps of entering into politics. Not all of them are rocking a poli-sci degree. Yeah. But what this shows from DeSantis is a level of statesmanship, a level of statecraft, a level of scholarly intelligence that he was able to work with his team to find the law on the books that enables him to make the right decisions for his state and to perform his constitutional duty. Because, again, at the end of the day, the faithful execution of the laws of a state are the responsibility of the governor. The buck stops there.
I 100% agree. And like you said, it's so important to have people within your government that understand finance and different things like that, which is a problem that we have with the Biden administration and their new bill to basically increase inflation, not decrease inflation. It's called the Inflation Reduction Act. let's show this poll right here. It was super interesting to see how Americans actually feel about this bill. They say 36% of them think that it's going to increase inflation. Only 23% think it won't change anything, and 12% think it will decrease. That 12% is not a good number with that. 36% think that it will increase inflation, which I agree with. If you actually look at the bill, it's stunning to see what's in there. It's slush funds, it's Green New Deal. Specifically, the Green New Deal, I was looking at the numbers, and it is $369 billion that go into Green New Deal policies. That amount of money is not going to decrease inflation. That is going to increase inflation.
It's kerosene on a fire. I mean, when you're talking about putting overall $510 billion into different corporate subsidies, and that includes the Green New Deal write-offs that you're talking about, you're just inflaming the wound more. You're causing the American people to bleed out every single day. I believe it was $6,800 right now per American family. That's how much purchasing power has been taken out of the American people's pockets.
That's outrageous.
By inflation. And this is going to do nothing but pick winners and losers. Just as the Democrats have done, they did it under Barack Obama. They're doing it now under the Obama administration 2.0 under Joe Biden.
Exactly. But Joe Biden, as I've said before, is not actually leading the country. He has handlers that lead the country.
This is where it comes down to the people around you. And I know that when we were talking about the governors, we talked about having the right team around you who can inform those decisions, as with Governor DeSantis. And it's the same here, just to an nth degree. It becomes the tail wagging the dog. And it's really a dangerous thing when you have a weak figurehead as your president who is being maneuvered and operated as essentially a meat puppet by the people around him.
Great way to describe him.
And this is what you get. You get AOC's Green New Deal. You get the different budget points that Chuck Schumer has been negotiating with all of his friends, all of his earmarks. And again, it's picking the winners and losers. It's the spending that is out of control, and none of it is designed to actually build this country up, handle our problems, and create jobs and ease the suffering of the American people. All of it is culturally driven, and it's all ideologically driven. And the American people can see that. That's why you see 36% say it's going to actually increase inflation. And the scariest number on there, Olivia, is the 29% of people who apparently didn't take high school civics or math.
No, plus 12%.
Plus 12% who actually disagreed.
Yeah.
I always write off the far left 10% and the far right 10% as being just hopeless ideologues, because these are people that have drank the Kool-Aid, they're in the cult, they're ready to take the plane down to South America, and they're not really going to listen to reason. That's what you saw in that poll, that 12% that actually buy this and are drinking the Kool-Aid.
Well, you know who also drank the Kool-Aid was Joe Manchin. I was so surprised to see him saying that, yes, this will decrease inflation. And it really brings to the point that a lot of people think that, Democrats included, think that Manchin betrayed Democrats with some of his more moderate policies that he has shown and decided to promote. But this shows that in the end, he's always going to follow what the Democrats want him to do. When it comes to the big stuff, things that really matter. And you brought up Kyrsten Sinema, who's in Arizona, actually, does the same exact thing.
Kyrsten Sinema, when it comes to Joe Manchin, these people are ultimately Democrats. They ultimately have their base that they need to appeal to, but they also have that real politic that Newt Gingrich used to like talking about in the 90s. They know very well that they are Democrats in red states. So Joe Manchin is going to do exactly as much as he can do in order to go along to get along. long, because he's been in office for that long for a reason, because he appeals enough to the labor unions and to the traditionally very pro-labor West Virginia voter, a lot of coal mining out there, and here, Kyrsten Sinema in Arizona, that's an anomaly. I don't know how she reasonably ever got elected when we're talking about someone who was an avowed Green Party socialist and now has suddenly been hailed as the great savior, her along with Senator Manchin, for standing in the gap and holding back the Biden-Harris administration, as I used to call it, and the massive far-left radical policies. The reason they're standing in that gap is because they realize if they go along and if this radical agenda is passed, they are unemployed at the end of their term.
Exactly.
It comes down to pure political survival. And I can't just abide people painting this with positivity and saying, oh, well, they're doing the right things. The why matters. Yes. They're doing the right things to save their own skins.
Yeah, to show that they're more moderate. Mark Kelly, who ran for Senate as well, tries to show that he's moderate, although we know that he votes 90% with the Democrats as well. I recently got sent to me a text message, which was a poll for Kyrsten Sinema. It was interesting the way that they make these polls that they send to you. Is that they started out talking about Republicans, what's going on in the race, and then they get into the weeds and mention stuff about Kyrsten Sinema. Would you be more likely to vote for Kyrsten Sinema if she does XYZ? I marked no on everything. It does not change my vote whatsoever. But as we talked about earlier in our conversation before the podcast, is that she's doing that to prepare for the next term. You know, she still has 2 years left in her term. She is thinking forward, which is what conservatives and Republicans need to do as well.
They definitely do, and forward thinking is something that Democrats have historically been very good at. We're at the tail end right now of a century-long game that was started by progressives before our grandparents were born. Now, when we're talking about Kyrsten Sinema looking ahead just 2 years, she's looking ahead at this because she realizes a couple of things. Number one, she completely torched her own Democrat support system here in the state of Arizona.
Yeah.
People were running after her in bathrooms, which kind of smacked to me like a little bit of organized agitprop. I'm not completely sure that wasn't a staged event.
Yeah.
As I think that probably got her some sympathy from the Republican side. But to digress
moderate
a little,
Republicans.
Moderate Republicans. I would say a Republican that votes for Kyrsten Sinema is no longer a moderate.
Exactly.
That is right out. But she's definitely planning ahead because what she's facing is a Democrat base that is not very pleased with her right now. She's going to have to lean hard on independents and moderates if she has any hope of keeping her seat. She knows that because it just comes down to it. Moderates and independents tend to be a bit more forgiving of deviations from the party narrative. You have the ultra-radical left, who she has burned, and they have a very, very long memory and very vehement anger.
Exactly. Speaking of the left, the Heritage Foundation put together a great synopsis of what this Inflation Reduction Act is. It really is just a euphemism for big government, socialism, and higher prices. That's how they describe it. And I 100% agree with that. Really, when you look at the meat and bones of it, we see these terrible, terrible things being put in, such as, Obamacare, redoing that. And what did you have to think about some of those issues that were in the Heritage synopsis that shows what's really in the bill?
Well, this bill is so pumped full of pork that it could actually solve some of the meatpacking shortages in Middle America right now. There is so much here to unpack. We have the Green New Deal. We have, as you were saying, the Obamacare funding that's built into this. This thing is built to continue funding Obamacare. I believe it's for the next 3 years. Now, when we talk about a bill that says it is the Inflation Reduction Act, This is where it comes down to single topic bills being crucial to the long-term survival of the United States, because every bill is an omnibus bill now.
Yes.
Every single bill. So you have Green New Deal baked in here. You have Obamacare baked in here. Things that no Republican in their right mind would ever endorse or vote for. But because it has Inflation Reduction Act stamped on the front, and because, as so many of our members of Congress on the right have informed us, they don't actually read these bills. I believe it was Congresswoman Lauren Boebert actually put forward a bill requiring a 5-day it's either a 3 or a 5-day period for the bill to actually be read and interpreted by each member of Congress before a vote can be held. That's something that needs to happen.
I agree, because these
Sidebar.
bills are thousands of pages long, and it's incredibly hard for people to read that so quickly, so they just scan it, and then that's when we have really big problems happen, like we see here. And it's just so funny. So the Medicaid, Medicare, in here, we saw that there was going to be drug reduction, and the Pfizer CEO actually said that he was mad. There was an article about how he complained to investors about lowering drug prices under the Inflation Reduction Act. I think this is hilarious. We've talked about Pfizer on the show before, and you know what? I think this is actually great for Pfizer finally getting what they deserve. But the rest of it is not so great. For example, these taxes are insane, which are put in here. So there is another minimum tax, which is going to be 15% for corporate businesses, which is really going to hurt businesses because these taxes are so expensive on them. They always say the lie that this isn't going to affect small businesses and different things like that. But that's such a lie. If you read this and you see historically what happens time and time again, that is wrong. And even the carried interest tax.
Oh, the carried interest tax, that's just a laugh and a half. I mean, you look at the last couple of years, around the time that the COVID panic all started out, you found an amazing number of Americans investing in the stock market for the very first time. You saw the massive launch of Robinhood and a whole bunch of other e-trading applications. You had GameStop and AMC Ape Strong.
I remember that. Wow, that's a blast from the past.
It is. But you have more Americans right now who are invested in our economy in a big way, sometimes even in a small way, $200. But $200 for somebody who's making $35,000 a year, that's a big investment for them.
It is.
But what we come down to with the carried interest tax hike is this takes every form of income that someone has from their employment. So you take a stockbroker, you take somebody who handles securities. Now, a portion of their pay is typically handled in investments and dividends from those investments. What this law says is now not only is that going to be taxed as wages rather than capital gains, it's also going to be non-deductible for the business that paid it.
That's ridiculous.
At the same time. So it's one of those cases where they're hitting you coming and going here. They're making it so that when you actually get the pay, it's being lumped in with the rest of your wages that can put you up to the next tax bracket in some cases severely.
Yeah.
And also, your company is going to be less apt to provide you this type of compensation because it's no longer an expense that they can deduct on their end. So at the end of the day, it's another way for the American people to get paid less for the work that they do and put more in Uncle Sam's pocket.
Exactly, and that's what the left wants. They would rather have everybody as the lower middle class than have people that make more money and more successful. They want to keep people lower so that they can put in these government policies and make people rely on them. And that's a really big problem that we've been seeing in the past couple years. And we need to be supporting people and encouraging them to have success instead of taking their success and not really helping anything because they're spending all this money for doing these taxes so that they can do things like the Green New Deal. And also, we need to talk about the IRS slush fund that is in this act. So it is $78.9 billion is given to the Internal Revenue Source and services, and that's outrageous. That's almost $80 billion going to the IRS. This is going to be so that they can employ hundreds more people for the IRS because they need to take everybody's money. This reminds me of, and I get more and more like, American in that, I wish that I could just, do the same way that our founders did. I get so emphatic and, about these problems because it feels like these taxes are the same way that they were when the founders left Britain.
You're not far off.
Yeah.
You're not far off at all. The taxes that our founding fathers faced, I would actually say we're worse now than they were then.
Yeah.
Taxation without representation, our founding fathers are rolling over in the grave because they were going off on the stamp tax, which was on textile goods, and the tea tax. And these were small, again, end-use taxes. The concept of taxing income before it even gets to the citizen would be so abhorrent to our founding fathers, they would not recognize America today. Because at least then the taxpayer has a method of control. If you can't afford to pay taxes, you can scale back your expenditures. But today, you have no such option. What are you going to do, work less?
Well, no, that's what they want, actually. And I feel there's been a rise in post-COVID as well of everybody just the mentality of laziness after work from home started. I'm not blasting everybody that works from home. I love working from home.
Hey, I did it for like 2 years.
Exactly. But as we see in the Gen Z and trends, if I follow all these funny Instagrams that are like corporate millennial, and they're always joking that they're doing work meetings from the grocery store and, doing a Microsoft Teams meeting while they're in the shower. All these are literal video memes that they do. It has really brought that culture to a forefront, and it's because they want people to work less. They'd rather people work less and rely on the government and stay on welfare.
There's an entire board on Reddit. I don't know if you get on that page anymore. It's like more my age group a little bit, but it's r/anti-work.
Yes.
That there's actually a large segment of the population of millennials, of Gen Z, who are not only, wishing to work less, they're purely anti-work. This is how entitled our society has become, that it is someone else's responsibility to provide for these people because they refuse to provide for themselves. That they are owed this because they were told to go to college and wound up getting 6 figures in debt, and there's no job that was promised to them. They were promised the corner office the second they finished their 4-year degree, and they're flipping burgers at McDonald's instead. This is what we're dealing with as far as the social decay. And unfortunately, now we're seeing that play out in policy decisions that are being made to cater to this audience because they're a captive audience. They're not out there founding new businesses, opening up LLCs. As I think we were talking about the minimum tax that came out, 15% minimum tax from Chuck Schumer, that will affect everybody from the handyman's LLC to multi-million-dollar corporations. And it's insanity that hurdle is being put in front of Americans who are now more entrepreneurial than ever. More small businesses have opened out of the home during COVID than they were ever prepared for because a large segment of the population rejected the notion that you were alluding to, that work from home means I'm going to do less. Work from home for a lot of people meant, I'm going to take on 3, 4, 5 gigs instead.
Yeah. Side gigs, and that's really what you've been seeing now, people making more money by doing several things because, during COVID, that was the only way they could make enough money to be able to live with everything that was going on and the craziness with the economy. And then we saw the American Rescue Act, which made things even worse. And it's just really unfortunate to see the way that, some of the younger generations did not do, some did, but some did not really understand the COVID and the impact of what it could do. And TikTok actually had a really big rise during COVID. I think one of the reasons it grew so much is because kids were at home. And speaking of TikTok, it is owned by China. And
China video.
Yes.
That's what we call it in my house.
Oh, that's good.
China
I have
video.
never and will never download TikTok because that they can see all the way to you typing as you type things when you are about to post something. That freaks me out. Google can do this as well. A lot of people don't know. So in your Gmails, they can see if you write something in a draft and then delete it. That is terrifying.
There's no such thing as unsend from Google or TikTok.
No, not at all. And China is really been trying to weave their way into America. And they recently did this by buying up a lot of farmland. Let's show this video from Tom Cotton talking about this.
But the simple strategic facts are these. China cannot feed its own people. The United States not only can feed our own people, we can feed much of the world. We should never surrender that massive strategic advantage. We should not allow Chinese nationals to buy up American farmland or to invest in American food and agricultural companies. We should protect those critical assets for our own country. I think that's something that members of both parties can get together around. I think most Americans would agree.
It really is a national threat. He is right about this. And we really need to be paying attention. And a lot of people haven't been paying attention because they've been doing these things where they're very surreptitious with buying the land. If you're not investigating this fully, then a lot of people don't know that it's going on.
It's easy to miss, and it's well shrouded when it's done by large corporations, but there are pretty much three angles to this situation with Chinese property purchases here in the U.S. that are occurring simultaneously, so it's hard for people to keep their arms around. On the one hand, you have the massive farmland purchases that are being enacted by Chinese agribusinesses, and even some in the United States with heavy Chinese investment. Bill Gates.
True.
But there's also the second tack where I believe it was 2019, we were talking about Huawei and ZTE technology being placed in American cell sites and in American fixed-point wireless infrastructure as well to provide internet and cellular service to rural areas. We found, there's actually a recent story on Western Journal I was working on, that a lot of these are positioned very close to American military infrastructure.
Wow, that's scary.
And not just the minor stuff. We're not talking about putting them outside of the port of LA. We're talking about near the strategic nuclear assets of the United States. We're talking about North Dakota. We're talking about Wyoming. In those areas, the most sensitive possible areas. And very, very quietly, a proposition was killed to construct a massive Chinese garden and pagoda 70 feet tall in one of the tallest locations in Washington, D.C., in easy line of sight from the Capitol, the White House, and the Pentagon, which, if you had the correct signal capture equipment and the correct decryption, would provide you with a very advantageous signal interception position. And then finally, you have the fact that right now, a massive amount of American housing, just single-family housing, is being purchased by Chinese nationals.
Yes.
So we have a serious housing problem here in the United States right now, and that is only being exacerbated. Inflation has rendered our dollar more powerless. It's made it so many people who are coming up in their 20s and in their 30s and are looking to purchase their first home simply can't. You either can't get the credit for it, or you can't make your paycheck go far enough in order to stretch to a mortgage. And we have, on the other hand, Chinese nationals purchasing billions and billions of dollars in American real estate, some for vacation homes, some for primary homes, but nonetheless, some as investments. So we're becoming a renter state as a nation, and we're going to be paying that rent to Beijing.
Yes. And, I was recently talking to someone about this, and it kind of got heated because they were saying that. So I posted a tweet that said that my rent went up almost $1,000 recently, which is insane. It is insanity to me. And this is all Biden's fault. And I got a reply, which was, you need to buy a home and not rent. And I'm like, I can't afford to buy a home. I'm 27. And even though I've been saving for a very long time, and even though I do look at my finances and do the best for my finances, I just can't afford that right now. And that is Biden's fault. And then, what his response to that was, well, it's because you're not living in the more low-income areas. And I said, there's crime in those very, very low-income areas. I, as a woman, need to be safe. And so, and even the difference wouldn't be that much of a difference. It would be literally like a 200 difference from where I am now versus there.
Which is basically a demilitarized zone.
Yes, exactly. And so I think that Republicans, we need to be compassionate to people that cannot afford this. And because this is Biden's fault, and we need to put the credit where it is due.
Oh, it's not the landlords. It's absolutely the Biden administration, the radical Democrats that are empowered, that actually want the American people to own less, rent more. They want more services, less ownership. You will own nothing and you will be happy, as we keep hearing in the zeitgeist.
And from the World Economic Forum, that's what they said.
Yeah. And did you ever think at any point that Republicans and conservatives would be agreeing with the talking points of the Rent Too Dang High Party and Jimmy McMillan in New York?
Nope.
But the rent is too dang high. But it's not for the reason that everyone on the left has been pointing to. Again, it's because the weakening of the American dollar. It's because the free real estate, it costs money. I just mean unoccupied. Real estate is getting snapped up by huge corporations, many of them backed by China. Blackwater's been picking up massive amounts of free property that's out there and that's available. And these aren't becoming homes for American families. They're becoming investment properties for international corporations. And you have people who are just trying to start out in your position in their 20s, like I said, trying to get that first home. You have people a little further along like me in their 30s. Got 4 kids at home, my wife at home. I'm not going to live in an area that's not safe for them while I'm out here working.
Exactly.
It doesn't make any sense at all. And this is one of the reasons why, and I know this isn't on our scripts at all for today's show, but it applies. Even in blue states right now, you've seen a massive increase in people purchasing firearms. Why? They know they're not safe.
Yeah.
And because
the crime is outrageous.
And they can't lift themselves out of that area because the areas where crime is endemic are expanding. So it's not just a question of, did I buy or rent in a good area? It's, I did buy or rent in a good area. It's not good anymore. Yeah. And now I can't get out. So is it more reasonable for me to go down to the local firearms store, spend $300-400 on a pistol and defend my family? Or is it more reasonable for me to go $300,000 into debt for the next 30 years that I can't afford?
Yeah, and that's what's happening a lot. And something that you said just a little bit earlier was about the corporations buying up single family homes. So a couple months ago, before I was deciding whether I was going to get an apartment or not, I was looking at some homes and trying to make an investment with the money that I have saved. I did not end up doing that. One of the reasons was because I put offers on several homes. And what happened was I put on an offer, and then the next day there was an offer that actually was a couple hours after that was put, and it was thousands higher than my offer, which was a good offer, but it was bought by a corporation. I had that happen
in cash.
That was the problem. So Americans cannot afford to buy these homes in cash the way that the corporations are. I saw it myself.
And I saw it back in, not 2010, 2010. So 12 years ago, we were starting to see this, where people are snapping up houses. It took my wife and I think, 7 different tries before we actually wound up buying our first home.
Wow.
And we were consistently beat out by cash offers. We didn't have any idea back then, of course. We thought it was just, families that are a little bit better off. Not every case. Not every case. Now it's corporations that have decided that instead of an American homeowner who can invest in investment products and become wealthy and become prosperous and invest in their companies through the stock market, they would rather a commoditized American people who are valuable to them as a source of ongoing infinite income for the rest of their natural lives. Again, you will own nothing and you will be happy.
That's exactly what they want. And my parents recently told me that my rent is higher than their first mortgage in the 1980s. So that is appalling to me. And there's so many things that have been going on, and China had to do so much with it, all these big corporations. And it's so important that we are bringing these issues to you as the Western Journal. We want to make sure that you are equipped with truth. And that is our primary reason that we do this. And that's why we can afford this, because of your subscriptions. If you go to join on our website, you can see that. Please help us, because we can't afford to bring these issues to you without that. And please join us again on Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Every week, we will be back this next Monday, and we're going to be having a lot of great guests coming up. It's super exciting, the guests that we've been talking with, and we're very excited to bring more content to you.